everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. As we have said many times before, we love to talk politics, but what most people don't realize is that the UAP topic is going to be front and center before you know it. So if we always ask our folks, if you love our show and you want to support it, our super chats are open. We appreciate your financial support. We love doing the show, but of course we don't love paying the bills. Also, if you're on YouTube, we always appreciate your subscription, your thumbs up, a comment, all that kind of stuff helps the the YouTube algorithm gods help us. But of course, speaking of the Twitter algorithm gods, a subscription, or sorry, a follow and a thumbs up, retweet, all that good stuff definitely helps us out. So last year, the UAP hearing was held in Congress. It was the first time in, I think, like 70-something years. And one of the things that kind of surprised me, that caught me off guard, was Representative Mike Gallagher entered into congressional record the Wilson Davis memos, which I have to admit I really kind of didn't know a whole lot about. So with that in mind, we are going to welcome to our show a UFO researcher that has dealt with many topics. Boy, I can't talk today. But in particular, the Wilson Davis memo. So please welcome Melinda Leslie. Melinda, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Sorry, we had a little technical stuff before starting, but I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Yeah, no worries. I'm a little tongue-tied today, and of course my prompter took a crap, so I'm having to wing it, and I'm not the best person at winging copy. Anyway, firstly, how are you?
Very good, very good. I had a busy day, but all things are good. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're very, very, very welcome. So you and I have spoken in the past about other topics, but when I reached out to you, one of the things that I wanted to touch on is this whole Wilson Davis memo thing, which I have to admit I'm not particularly well versed in. So I'm kind of like flying a bit blind here. But I know that this is of particular interest because this deals with historical crash retrieval programs that Congress is now fishing around about because they came to the conclusion that the United States Air Force, the DoD in general, well, let's just say they haven't been very truthful with our members of Congress. I would say probably not in a very legal way. So the Wilson Davis memo, as I understand, deals with a historical crash retrieval program. So, and backing up a bit, let me put out there that most of our viewers are not the UAP crowd, UFO Twitter crowd.
I was going to ask, because I thought, how backed up do we got to go?
Well, I think you might have to kind of put it sort of at a beginner's level. So pretty much everyone that follows us on the Good Trouble Show or our parent account, Stand for Better, for the most part are political activists that, of course, are interested in advocating for what's for the good of our country. And this particular topic is new to them. So looking at it from the lens of not knowing what the hell any of this stuff is, why don't you fill us in a bit about A, the UAP topic, and then B, what the Wilson Davis memos are that were entered into congressional records, which, by the way, that's a pretty big deal for something to get entered into record by a congressman, right?
Sure, that's right. That's right.
Okay.
And there's a whole chain of events as to why that happened. Okay. So first off, the UAP subject is, of course, the government has rebranded the term UFO to get away from the negative stigma and the ridicule associated with, a lot of bad baggage in history. And Matt, you can hear me okay and see me okay, right?
Totally. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, very good. I'm on the Center for New Age in my office, and sometimes the internet here does lag if a bunch of people here are on it. So I apologize in advance if we have any of that going on. Anyway, so going back to So to get away from the negative stigma and the ridicule and really bad baggage, right, associated with the term UFO, the whole ridicule factor, the government has basically rebranded the subject. That's a simple explanation, to UAP. Now, a year ago, not this year's, but last year's, and the 2022 NDA, National Defense Authorization Act, had the wording in there that UAP was unidentified aerial phenomena. In this year's, the 2023 NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, they changed that from kind of unidentified aerial phenomena to unidentified anomalous phenomena. So that's what UAP stands for now. But and I'm going to correct you, Matt, if you don't mind. It's not really memos. Okay, thank you. Sorry, but it's not really memos. It's notes. So it's notes that happened from a meeting between Dr. Eric Davis and Rear Admiral Thomas Wilson. So it was a conversation between them that we believe, at the very least, Dr. Davis took notes and or recorded it and made notes from those later.
So who is Eric Davis? I know who Eric Davis is, but many of our viewers are not going to be familiar with him.
Eric Davis is a physicist, engineer, research scientist. Hang on, in a moment I can give you his exact title. I'm just forgetting off the top of my head. But long history in the subject. Now works for a major aerospace company, and in the past, I'm not sure all the companies he worked for, but a couple different ones. And most notably, he worked for a while for scientist Hal Puthoff, teamed up with him on a lot of Dr. Hal Puthoff's research, and running his company in Austin, Texas. And so he was very involved in that, and was a consultant or loosely a board member, at the very least, associated with the boards of NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science, which, not to confuse everyone, because you guys, this is a lot to get into for people who aren't aware.
I can barely keep up half the time.
To say the least.
That's okay.
But we'll get there. And it's going to be a circular discussion.
Got it. That's how I tend to talk, so that's great.
Yeah. Well, same here. Good. We're on the same page. Okay, so National Institute of Discovery Science became under Bob Bigelow, owner of Bigelow Aerospace, was a sub company started up under him of a bunch of longtime researchers in the field who are scientists and aerospace guys with a big background in aerospace and sciences and working for the government, intelligence backgrounds, whatnot. Now, in the UFO community, we know of something called the Working Group, the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group, which originally met at BDM Corporation in 1985 and involved a bunch of these guys. Before that, we know now from the work of Jacques Vallée that it was somewhat called the Invisible College, became the Working Group, or the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group, which the short name, just for quick reference, is Working Group. And then that got nicknamed because of two researchers in the UFO field who were coming across these guys, getting documents from them, etc. In the name, the two major researchers were Jamie Chandray and Bill Moore. And so together they said, well, we're talking to these guys all the time and emailing with them, and so we need to give them code names so no one else knows what we're talking about but us. So they called them different bird names, and collectively the aviary. So that was Moore and Chandray calling them that. Okay, so that's the aviary. And then over time, they became of interest to business owner Robert Bigelow, and he started to fund them and whatnot. And it was known loosely, I don't know that it had an exact name other than the Bigelow Group, before it officially became NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science. Now, to bring everyone up to speed, National Institute of Discovery Science ended up becoming BASS. There was overlap there. Bigelow Aerospace, it's BASS, Bigelow Aerospace Science. Why am I forgetting? I know that.
That's okay.
It became BASS. I know this. I'm pulling a blank. It was so rushed right beforehand. We were having a technical problem, unfortunately.
That's all good.
My brain scrambled. Okay. Science Studies, Bigelow Aerospace, BA. So I guess it's Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Science Studies, whatever. Anyways, BAS. But that's what it'd be, and I'll tell you in just a moment. I'll look it up to know for sure. And I know that. I'm just okay. Moving on. So, and that became that. BAS ended up for projects approaching the Pentagon and got funding from the Pentagon. And my understanding is at that point it became the Pentagon said, we'll take this over, okay, and we'll give you funding, but then it's our program, and that became OSAP, which is Advanced Weapons Systems Applications Program. God, that's even harder. I got that one right. Advanced.
They love these acronyms, don't they?
Yeah.
I think it's Advanced Aerospace Weapons. Shit, I can't figure it out. It's okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Advanced. It's because it's ASWAAP. So Advanced Space Weapons Applications Program. I think that's what it is.
You know,
or aerospace weapons.
I think I'm going to approach like a board game company and call the board game government acronyms. You know, it's like it may be a spin the wheel thing.
I
Generate
know
your own
acronym. Just flying off the top of my head after I've had a really busy day, but I just did a presentation for a conference, and that's why I'm saying I can look up the name, because right here on my laptop I've got the notes and everything from that conference. I just gave a presentation all about this very thing and the history and how it morphed, and so I actually have one screen, if you will, in PowerPoint that gives the acronyms and what they are. So, but Advanced Weapon Systems Applications Program, OSAP, and then OSAP under it was ATIP. Okay, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program under OSAP. So there we go. So you had OSAP begat ATIP being under OSAP. We know that now because of the work coming forward of Lukatsky, work and writing along with George Knapp from KLAS-TV, and the book Skinwalkers of the Pentagon. So because of that, we do know that was the history, and so that morphed out of it, and then also out of this group of people became To the Stars Academy. So that was the kind of the birth of the whole ATIP program. Lou Elizondo coming forward, he did that while on the board and involved with To the Stars Academy. So it goes To the Stars Academy, to ATIP, to OSAP, to BAS, and BAS was OSAP, but just when it got the government funding and contracts, it had the name change. BAS morphed out of or became NIDS, kind of the reincarnation of NIDS, and then Bigelow Group, which was Working Group, which was nicknamed Near Very, and etc. So there's the long history. Now, what does this have to do with the Wilson Davis notes? As I started to say, it's really notes from the meeting, not a memo. And what makes it significant is who Admiral Wilson was at the time. He had the position of J2, second in command of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, in alignment to become the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And that's part of what they used over his head. He was due for all these promotions. Okay. And it was, you can't talk about this or you won't get your promotions. But it goes back to, now, the very beginning, in all fairness, because there's people going to be mad at me if I don't go back to this, which is when Dr. Stephen Greer was doing his disclosure project, he was meeting with different guys in DC and doing what were these briefings to inform them about this and to say, you need to look into this if you don't already know, kind of thing. And then getting some of these various high-placed military and government witnesses and people involved in these programs to come forward. He did amazing work in his disclosure project, and he ended up producing a series of videos because there were these hearings in DC, and of course, and then also his book about it, which I have here somewhere in my office. In fact, I have it right here. I'll give credit where credit is due really quick. Yes, I just happen to have it handy. But this is the book by Dr. Stephen Greer about that whole project. Okay. It says, disclosure, military and government witnesses reveal the greatest secrets in modern history. But in his meeting with these individuals, he had a meeting with the head of the second command, the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, Admiral Thomas Wilson. And so he had some people go with him, another person involved in giving testimony and whatnot to Dr. Greer was Edgar Mitchell, astronaut Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and his assistant, Sherry Adamiak at the time, Commander Will Miller in the Navy, who I think may have been the connection to how they got introduced to the Admiral, if memory serves me correctly, and also some other individuals whose names are escaping me right now. But again, now there is one person that I think when we post this later, Matt, I should have you add, which is this gentleman who has a great historical overview of the whole thing. And his name is Matthew Manley. And he has this great document he did. So Matthew, if you're listening, thank you. I was trying to contact him, but I got too busy working, so we were playing phone tag. And it's an introductory guide PDF that I think we should link to that has the whole notes, memo, all the associated documents, and a history timeline of the whole background. He really did a thorough job, and I'd like to give him credit for that. So I think that's a really good thing to link to, and people can look that up.
And it's specifically regarding the Wilson Davis notes. And sorry, there's a bit of a delay here, so sorry to step on you.
Involving that, it's a PDF all about the history, all the different names involved, the characters, the whole timeline history of the chain of custody, et cetera, et cetera. It's all in there. He does a fantastic job. So there's a few other people that do online. There's a very well-known document that's known as the Threads document, and that has a great for people on Twitter, they may be familiar with it, that document, and unfortunately I don't have a link to it right here, but I'm going to give you those links. I'll make sure so in the future on this you can put them down along with my bio and information. Okay. Yep. So
we'll put that PDF in the video because this sounds very, 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 very important, especially people that are new to this topic.
Then you can get the specifics about dates, names, people's involvement, etc., out of those documents.
Great.
They're both very, very good, and I highly recommend them, and I think we should link to both of them.
Perfect.
But Matthew's one is very short, it's very concise, just about Wilson Davis. So going back to, Greer gets this meeting, brings these other individuals with him, including Edgar Mitchell and the commander, etc. Okay, so they meet with him and they're briefing the admiral saying, you should know about this reverse engineering program, that there are crashed and retrieved and possibly shot down craft in our possession that are being reverse engineered by private aerospace companies, etc. And Greer had this from other people he had spoken to and his research and his disclosure project that he kind of knew this to be happening, or at least strongly believed it. So they met with the admiral to tell him all about it. The admiral said, I don't know what you're talking about, but this is all very interesting. And there you go. So that's the original meeting and Greer briefing the admiral about this. That caused the admiral then to look into it and start to say, apparently piqued his interest enough that he said, I'm going to look into this and I'm going to find out if this is true. Is this really going on? Under him, again, Thomas Wilson, who was, again, the position of J2, head of the second command, Joint Chiefs of Staff. Okay. And he had a bunch of illustrious positions in his background to get to that level in the Pentagon and with the government, of course. And so he said, the people who do what are called the SAP, Special Access Programs, and the unacknowledged Special Access Programs, and the waived Special Access Programs, so it's known as SAP, USAP, and WSAP. But these people fall under him as his job there. And whether military subcontractors, okay, different companies providing technology, military technology, aerospace technology, etc., to the government, whether they get funding or not, goes through his approval process and people under him. So he started to ask those people, is any of this true? Because apparently Greer and company, when they went and saw him, gave him a lot of detailed information. He thought this is a fairly credible group of people, being that, Commander Will Miller, who knew him, was there, and obviously Dr. Edgar Mitchell, etc. So he's like, okay. And I think there was one other gentleman whose name escaping me that was present with them. But anyways, so these guys tell him all this. He thinks this is pretty credible, so he decides to look into it. He goes to the people that under him in charge of this funding, and they say, well, we don't really know, but ask these guys. Long story short, he gets fed along and sent to and gets a meeting with an aerospace company. Okay. It is not mentioned specifically which one in the document, but we now have a lot of additional information that seems to point a very clear path to it being Lockheed. And there's a lot of additional information I can get into that. So he goes to them, contacts them because of who he is. He gets a meeting, and he gets a meeting with these, I understand it's 3 individuals that they call kind of the gatekeepers or the watchkeepers, that they call themselves that apparently. And they're overseeing this project. Again, we don't know for certain, but a lot of evidence, a significant amount of evidence suggests that it's Lockheed. So now I'm prepared to say it's Lockheed.
I've heard the same.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You know enough to, yeah, good, okay. And so he goes to them and said, so once he gets, fed along the food chain to end up talking to them, gets a meeting with them. And they basically say in these notes, and people, you can read this in the notes for yourself. If you haven't already, you need to. And again, we'll link to that, to 2 different sources where you can see them along with some additional information to educate yourself. Okay, so he goes to them and goes, okay, is this going on? And they say yes. And they end up saying, we have a craft in our possession, an intact craft, meaning UFO, meaning something otherworldly. Okay.
Not a seagull, not a drone.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Mick West, I couldn't resist.
No, you don't have to apologize to him, that's for sure. Okay,
copy that.
Yeah, copy that. Yeah. Okay. Just spelling it like it is, man. Okay.
Me too.
Okay. So he goes to them and they say, yeah, we have a craft in our possession. We believe it works. We haven't quite figured it out, but yes, we have a craft. I believe it was a crash retrieved one anyways, but he said, so it's about, so in this document, what makes this important, it's about the fact that there's craft that were in the government's, possession, probably recovered by the military in crash retrievals, okay, that went to an aerospace company. That aerospace company is working on developing reverse engineering that technology. Figuring, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and figuring out how it works. And the truth is, in the history of this subject, there's other companies probably also involved in this process. Rand comes to mind, and etc. McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, and there's other countries that companies, I should say, that like, and countries for that matter too.
Which
companies, yeah, Battelle, exactly.
Yeah. And guess who was on the advisory board of? Guess who was on the advisory board of Battelle? Ronald Moultrie. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
How convenient. Yeah, how convenient, yeah. Like we're going to get the truth from them because of, yeah.
Probably
okay.
not.
Yeah. No, that's my point. Yeah. Okay. So, but we could from Senate and Congress. We're going to get there eventually in this discussion.
It's going to happen. Trust me.
It's going to. Yeah. They're digging and they want to know. And I've always said, if they have I'll say cojones, I think I'm safe to say that, to look into it, if they've got the fortitude to really look into it, this is going to require a congressional investigation. to get into these crash retrievals, reverse engineering programs, stuff in our possession given to private companies. The point of these nodes, and there's so much data now, and we're going to get into that too, as to that this meeting not only likely happened, that these are in fact Eric's notes from the meeting. There's even some more recent things that have come out in support of that. And so given that, if the admiral did go find out about this program, was told, but wasn't allowed to see it. Now, there's this other information that's come up, and researcher Richard Nolan did a recent brilliant interview looking at Jacques Vallée's new book, Forbidden Science, Volume 5.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Again, apologies for the delay, and I know we're kind of like stepping on each other, but you and I in our conversation before had spoken about that, and thanks to you, I went and listened to it. And folks, I'll put a link into it in the description, but it's you must listen. I've never met Richard Nolan, and this was actually, to be honest, the first time I had ever listened to him, but oh my God. So thank you for turning me on to that.
I've known Richard for years, since he first entered into the scene. I've been deeply involved in the whole UFO subject for 34 years. So I met the first time Richard was ever at a UFO conference and attended one. I was there and met him. So, but I've known him for a long time. He's an incredible researcher, kind of the historian in the UFO field of the subject. He's written a whole series of books about it. A brilliant series called UFOs in the National Security State, all about the history of the government, what they know, all about through documents out there on it, and interviews he did with people involved, etc. And it's really exemplary research, and he gets into the whole history. And there's volumes 1 and 2, and he's about to release, or is working on, my understanding is, volume 3, and each one covers I'm forgetting off the top of my head, a 10 or 20 year period of it. And so it's really the most kind of comprehensive history of the government's involvement with the UFO, or now UAP subject. Okay, so, but what he did is taking Jacques Vallée's new volume 5 of Forbidden Science, and so Jacques is produces the 5th volume, obviously, and each one covers like a 10-year period of Jacques Vallée's personal involvement in the field. Now, Jacques Vallée is a very famous researcher in the UFO field, and was working in tandem with J. Allen Hynek during the Blue Book days, and worked for him, and then after that, etc. So Jacques got a very long history in the subject, and that can be easily looked up by anyone. But he was, importantly, and how he relates to this story, he was on the Science Advisory Board for NIDS. So he was involved in National Institute Discovery Science. That's Bob Bigelow's organization, the precursor to OSAP and BAS, being NIDS, okay? And it was on the Science Advisory Board for quite a while, and had other ancillary involvement with them. But we knew when his volume 5 of his journals was going to be published, we were like, okay, according to the 10-year span, this should cover the Wilson Davis period. And obviously, as you know, Matt, because you saw Richard Nolan's presentation, and again, link to it. So I hope you're making notes here, Matt. We need to link to the Threads document. We need
I know it's a lot of stuff.
to Matthew's timeline history, and we need to link to Richard Nolan's presentation. So we'll remember that. Yeah, there we go. Right down. Remember those. Okay, and so we should have done this ahead of time, but this is kind of
that's okay. It's all fine.
It's called I've been really busy working. I've been really busy working, so I'm sorry, everybody.
Hey, okay, yeah, we all have to. Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, but Loose Threads is the name of the document, by the way. It's an amazing overview by those guys. Yeah, you're familiar with it.
Yeah, we actually sorry. Go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, so I was just saying. So Vallée, yes, in his book covers this period and confirms, yes, the meeting happened with Eric Davis. Yes, those are his notes, and there's other people coming forward and confirming it now. So he covers that, and we were all wondering, was it going to be there? Oh my God, it's in there in spades. So, but then what's also brilliant in there is in the Wilson Davis notes, in this conversation, which I'll get more into in a minute, they're sitting in a car. Davis is asking the admiral questions. The admiral comes back. Now, it's a couple years later. What happened is he looked into the existence of this reverse engineering program and talked to this company. Wasn't allowed to see anything. But apparently there were these guys before him that looked into it. And he even says, they said someone was looking into it, almost uncovered it, almost, went public with it. And so because of that, they cracked down, kind of, tighten up the lid on the whole thing. And so they ended up sending the admiral away saying, you're not on our bigot list, meaning the approval list, to have information on this. You're not on the list. You don't have a need to know. Bye-bye. And he's like, no, wait a second. You guys don't get any funding unless it comes from people under me.
Right.
And whether you guys even exist as an aerospace company doing any government contracts, it's like, wait a second, and they said, nope, you're not on the list. Bye-bye. So they sent him away. So he goes back to the people that sent him there and said, all mad, and says, look at you guys. This can't be allowed. This is under my purview. This only happens because it's under me, and I need to know everything about it. And he ended up getting threatened with any advancement in his career to being head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, okay, and any advancement, and saying, drop this, or you're not moving up.
So
he dropped it.
So he's the number 2 in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he's
at the time that this happened, he became head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But he
kept his mouth shut when he was told, if you want to move up the ladder,
and he said,
you better shut the F up.
Yeah, and then how convenient. He became Joint Chiefs of Staff. Did we ever hear anything from him? No. So right. I can understand this gentleman has serious egg on his face over this.
Right.
Now, moving forward. So there's a gentleman by the name of Oak Shannon that's mentioned in the notes. That Oak knew the admiral. Okay. Oak Shannon has now come forward and done these interviews with Jay Anderson of Project Unity. Oak has admitted, yes, I knew the admiral. He cannot speak to whether the notes are exactly true the way they are. He's also being very guarded about that. But he said everything the admiral says in there about knowing me and our conversations that I helped put him and Eric together. And he called me and said, the admiral called Oak Shannon and said, can I trust Eric Davis? And Oak Shannon used to be in charge of, I forget the exact title, but it was secret things and covert projects and whatnot at Los Alamos National Laboratories. And he had a big background in military and aerospace and engineering and everything. So that's his background. But again, that can all be looked up. And so now, how did Oak know Eric? Well, that gets back to NIDS and the working group. Oak was one of the original members of the working group at that meeting in BDM. And I can get more into that in a minute. In fact, I'll go there now.
Okay.
Oak Shannon was one of those members. Now, part of how Wilson Davis notes got released, and I'll give that time. I know you guys were all over the place, but it's not a linear thing. Okay. How they got released is first off, there was a space historian in Australia who was working with Dr. Edgar Mitchell on a book about his life. My understanding is the research for this, or this had been started, this project, and then Dr. Edgar Mitchell passes away. Dr. Edgar Mitchell has files at home of his, and anyways, gives those to this space historian to go forward with his project, and said, if any of this stuff will help you. The guy goes through these files, has them in his possession. He is in Australian researcher, and so he looks through this stuff. Now, meanwhile, my understanding is this Australian researcher in either spoke at or at least was involved in some kind of space conference. A gentleman who is a researcher in the UFO subject in Australia by the name of James Rigney, and a dear friend of mine, James meets this guy and becomes friends with him. My understanding is they met at a conference. Okay. He meets this guy, gets to know him. Not really well known, is my understanding, and I've even asked James about this in detail. But so they kind of get to know each other. So when this guy gets given the stuff by the family, he goes through it to find what he might want to use for the working on this book or this future book. Okay. He's working on this. This is my understanding, you guys. And so don't anyone shoot me if you have additional information, but this is my understanding. So, and I've had conversations with James Rigney about this. So this guy then finds this stuff that doesn't have any interest for him for his book. And he says to James Rigney, I think this might interest you. Like it's stuff that might be UFO related. And do you want it? Okay. My understanding is James Rigney goes to his house, gets a chance to, and he gives him these or lets him go through the stuff to find these additional things and gives those few things to James Rigney. In there were a bunch of NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science documents. There was a series of printed out emails that became very controversial because they deal with an alien autopsy film. That itself is controversial, but I don't need to go down that road. And then also other things that are actually printed on out something on it. And so there's these actual NIDS documents. And in there were these, what are called the EWD, which are Dr. Eric Davis. And so these are his notes. So in there are at this, and it says in the very beginning of the notes, this is a meeting between Dr. Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson. So those are in there with these other things. So he takes these things that are of interest to him. He ends up, my understanding, maybe a little time went by, a year or something anyways, but he ends up going to a UFO conference, one that I'd seen him at many times in Nevada. And anyways, long story short, so he ends up going there, and Grant Cameron, researcher in the field, is there. He shows him to Grant. Grant's looking at him going, oh, this is interesting. But right away, something jumped out to Grant that he said, wait a second, this is such an obscure detail. I think there might be some reality to this because this is a unique, obscure name that I am uniquely versed in. And that was the name of Oak Shannon. At about the same time, also by James Rigney, I saw these documents. And they jumped out to me right away. Now I can't remember if Grant actually showed them to me or Rigney did. It almost doesn't matter. But it was at one of Paula Harris's Star Works conferences where Grant saw them and I saw them. Okay, so I knew right away because I knew the name Oak Shannon. How did I know the name Oak Shannon? Well, I've been researching the history of the working group, the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group, since I first found out about it in about the early to mid 90s. And I've been researching it ever since. So, easily 30, if not 32 years of research into that group. And one of the members of that group was a gentleman by the name of Jack Houck, who was in charge of advanced systems analysis at McDonnell Douglas Corporation. That's why these guys were all top level aerospace and science guys, and some of them CIA too, that were involved in this group. Okay. So Jack Houck, I got to know initially through some friends that were having him come do. He was very famous for what was doing a psychokinesis spoon bending party class. They call it PK party, and at someone's house. And I went and did that. And then I started taking classes that he did at various learning and educational centers, long story short, doing the psychokinesis spoon bending. That's how I originally met Jack. Jack was also trained in remote viewing. He was one of the original people going in and checking and verifying what was going on at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, during the early days of the development of the remote viewing program by Hal Puthoff, Russell Tarr, Ingo Swann, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So he was going in and looking into that and what they were developing. He was sent there by Mr. McDonald of McDonnell Douglas, who said, Jack, go look into this. tell me what they're doing. And so he looked into that. So he got very interested in the fact that they were doing psychokinesis, spoon bending stuff, as well as a whole variety of psi things, but also the remote viewings. That gets into that whole history. But because of that, I eventually took that from Jack Houck, and then eventually I got trained in remote viewing by David Morehouse, one of the original military remote viewers, as well as others. That's just a side story. But because of all that, I had developed a friendship with Jack Houck. Upon his death, another friend of mine who I introduced him to and also became very good friends with him was my friend Steve Polidoros. Steve and I became friends with Jack and his whole family. Now, I ended up moving out of the Southern California area to where I now live in Sedona, Arizona. But Steve, still being in that area, remained very close to Jack up until his death. And so he'd become very close to Jack's family and Jack's wife. Upon Jack's death, his wife, so this is very similar to the Edgar Mitchell family having documents of his giving to a researcher. Well, in this incident, so his wife calls up Steve and says, there are these file boxes in the garage. We're going to shred them unless you want anything out of them. She knew Steve and I were very serious researchers in the field, and said, if there's anything you want out of here. So Steve gets these 2 file boxes and goes through them and ends up finding a few, you guys, I wish it was even more. And someday I'm going to go through all this material myself. But Steve right away noticed and knew, because of my history and research into the working group, that he saw some stuff specifically regarding that. And what there were the original agenda and minutes and meeting notes of Jack's. And he did a lot of, back then there was no PowerPoint, so it was good old fashioned overhead projections, written on, printed out on clear vellum, just shown in overhead. Okay. So in there was this stuff and these copies of these overhead projectors from the first meeting of the working group at BDM. Well, in Jack's notes, it mentions Oak Shannon's name. So when I get shown all these many years later, Wilson Davis notes, I immediately go, oh my gosh, I know that name. That means working group. If it has Oak Shannon, what an obscure thing to have in there. And Grant saw it for the same reason. Now, it turns out there was even more, because Grant knew the name. Apparently at one time, now, Dr. Eric Davis, is known to quite a few friends in ufology and people, researchers in the field. All these various characters, if you will, in the working group are known in ufology and have had levels of involvement with various researchers. And some of them are quite well known, like John Alexander, who's out there speaking, and some of the others too. So Eric Davis being one of those. Eric had developed a friendship with Grant Cameron at one point. Apparently, Eric, at one point, my understanding, according to Grant, is what was upset with John Alexander or had been released from being on the board or his involvement with NIDS at the time because of John Alexander. That's my understanding. He gave Grant a series of notes from that original meeting at BDM Corporation of the working group in 1985. They were Oak Shannon's set of notes. So I had Jack Houck's set of notes from the same meeting. He had Oak Shannon's. Okay. Now, why is this? Anyone out going, okay, well, I'm not following why this is right to Wilson Davis, because it talks about Oak Shannon, his relationship to the group, the fact he was in the working group, and that's why he was in a position to recommend, I know Eric Davis. I've been in this group, organization with him, to his friend the Admiral. Okay, and the Admiral said, now, Oak Shannon and the Admiral knowing each other, I'm not sure the background history. It's probably written up in Matthew's document. I'd have to look, but there's a history there. Okay. And Oak goes into more detail in these interviews with Jay Anderson on Project Unity. So here's Oak saying, yes, I knew him. I had these conversations with him. So he has openly said that a number of times now in these series of interviews. So, and Oak, being alive and being able to be interviewed and has said that. So, but this These notes about the original meetings show Oak's involvement. Oak took detailed notes, but there's one side thing in there that's very interesting, and it's so confirming and so random that would only happen if all these things interrelate.
Okay.
Okay. And that is in the midst of his notes in 1985, at the bottom of one of the pages, he has the name of the group. He says Advanced Physics Group /AP10.
What does that mean? I've never heard of that.
Okay. Well, it's mentioned in the Wilson Davis notes that the admiral is telling Eric in the interview and sitting in the back of the car that Eric's either recording or taking notes from. He says, Oak told me all about the group, the history of the group that you know each other from. Okay. Oak told me all about it. Oak told me about the advanced physics, the AP10 group. And that says that in the notes. And when all of us researchers in the field first saw the Wilson Davis notes, we didn't know what the AP10 reference was. It's like, what the heck is that? What's that code, AP10? No, I knew because he said, Oak told me all about the group. I assumed it was a name for the group. But I had never heard the working group called AP10 or AP-10. And then all of a sudden, so after the Wilson Davis notes are given to Grant by James Rigney, Grant decides and talks to a lawyer friend of his, long story short, and decides maybe it's best not to go forward with these. But he gives them to a friend of him named Chase that posts a lot of stuff on Reddit. And that's how they come out originally to the community, is Chase posts them on Reddit. Now, there's a little side story here about we talked about Richard Dolan earlier, about Richard Dolan being shown by one of the working group members. And I don't know that Rich has ever said who that was. I think it can come down to either it was Hal Puthoff or it was Kit Green, who both have had, regular communications over the years with Richard Dolan, and that he established friendships with. I'm not sure which one, but anyways, Rich had been shown a couple of the pages way back when, before they made it out into the public. And he always talks about that specific wording, not made by human hands, not flown by humans, not made by human hands, whatever the lingo is. That's in the Wilson Davis notes, meaning, again, the admirals meeting with these guys to say, this is extraterrestrial technology in our possession, and we have a working craft. We think we know how it works. Okay. So, and again, the significance here is this is the Second Command Joint Chiefs of Staff being turned away from a program that he should have every authority and purview to know about, and every clearance. They even said to him in the meeting, all your tickets match up, meaning all your security clearances are there. And yet they turned him away and didn't have to show him.
Wow.
So it also demonstrates, see, this is why this is such a big deal, is because if this meeting did happen, and again, there's so much evidence to support that, I think it's safe to say it did, that this meeting happened and the admiral's all upset being turned away, that at some point, not only did the UFO secret become a corporate secret, that it got handed to these corporations for the reverse engineering, but the government lost control of it. That you could have someone in the position of Admiral Wilson being turned away and not having access to it.
Which that says a lot right there.
Yeah, it became a corporate secret. And so when the government says it's not our secret, they might not be completely wrong if it's become a corporate secret. And, under corporate purview. And so he, going back to the guys under him to look into this, gets upset and gets threatened with moving up in his position. And of course, he's furious. Now, he lays low in a conversation in the future of having these conversations with Oak Shannon, knowing that Oak was a part of this, group and whatnot. And but anyway, so Oak says you can trust Eric Davis. So at that point, the admiral decides to reach out to Eric Davis and probably to the group, being the working group, because they obviously sent Eric. Eric's not there of his own accord, okay? And says, I'm furious. I was turned away from this. I was threatened with my position or moving up, my ability to move up and advance. And I was, threatened with that, and I'm furious, and this is what I heard, and tells the working group, Alla. And how do we know it's via the working group? Because of Oak Shannon. See, that's the whole significance. Oak Shannon said, I'm in this group with Eric. You can trust him. We're going to send Eric. There was talk even apparently of them sending someone else, but it ended up being Eric. I think with Eric, there was maybe plausible deniability to some degree, kind of 6 degrees of separation, if you will.
Right.
He was involved with the group, but not literally on their board, but here they go. They send Eric, and Oak says, hey, you guys, who do you recommend? And you can trust Eric. And so Eric, meets with the admiral based upon Oak Shannon's making that connection, for him and introducing them. Apparently via phone calls, but still says, yes, you can trust him. I know him. He's part of this group. And that's why, so going back to the AP-10 reference, the admiral is saying to Eric Davis in the interview, in the discussion, he says, Oak told me all about the group, the AP-10 group. And we didn't know what that meant. Now, going back to Grant Cameron, who originally released these and had Chase Howard, I think is his name, who puts them on Reddit, for Grant, but does it so no one knows who did it, who put it out there. And part of it is Grant had talked to this lawyer friend of his, Michael Holland, and said, hey, look, maybe we should be cautious here, but this is why. Now I understand why Grant was so cautious. Eric Davis at one point had some kind of disagreement or something with John Alexander, and had given Grant Cameron the Oak Shannon original working group notes. So that's how Grant had those. He had Oak's notes given to him by Eric Davis because Eric and Grant had become friends. But he said, this will really piss off Alexander if you go forward with these. So apparently Eric was trying to do that, and said to Grant, this will, but he said, I promised Oak Shannon I would never release these till his death. But at the time, Oak Shannon was very ill and having heart problems, and my understanding is maybe he had heart surgery, and it was bad enough that they didn't think he would make it. So apparently Dr. Davis tells Grant Cameron, you can go forward with these in the event that Oak Shannon passes away. But I promised him I wouldn't do it till he passed away. But he said, but I'll be getting even at getting thrown out of NIDS or whatever, at the time, is my understanding. And so he gives them to Grant. So Grant has Oak. So again, so that happened before our friend in Australia gave the meeting notes to Grant, that were gotten out of, received out of Dr. Edgar Mitchell's files. So he gives those to Grant. So that's why when Grant reads them, goes, oh my God, Oak Shannon, knowing he has Oak Shannon's notes and all the detailed stuff from the original meeting. I knew I had the same reaction because I had Jack House notes that happened to mention Oak Shannon in it. So Grant and I, for the same reason, have the same reaction of, oh my God, we think this is legit because of that obscure name. So Grant's like, I can't go forward with my own name in any way with Wilson Davis because I don't want to piss off Eric that I went forward with Oak Shannon's notes before I could. And so maybe, but I think we need to put this out there to see how people react to it. So he used his friend Chase to post them on Reddit. Chase is like, I got this covered. I know how to do this. No one will know where they came from, and we can see how everybody reacts to them. And of course, when they got put out into the community went, what? Not everyone, but those who came
Right.
across it were like, what? You know, and so there you go. So now that, but what happened is, because the various names in the document, people started to do research on the various people mentioned in it. Like, are these people all legit? Did they have these positions? Can this be investigated? So as the investigation world of ufology went to town, not all, but a few bright young individuals go to town on the notes. And so in that midst, Jay Anderson of Project Unity had been getting some pretty good interviews and had connections. So I guess using people he met and interviews and doing a very respectable job. So hats off to him. And so my understanding is he used his connections to reach out to Oak Shannon and got Oak Shannon willing to talk to him and willing to go on camera talking. And sure enough, that's where you have Oak Shannon now in a series of interviews with Jay saying, yep, I think there's 3 interviews if I remember correctly. And so you have Oak Shannon saying, yep, I had that conversation with the Admiral. I told him I knew Eric. That's all true. That part. Okay. And, but so Jay Anderson puts this out there, even the first time, saying, I talked to Oak Shannon. Here's Oak Shannon listening to it. Grant Cameron listens to this and goes, oh my God, Oak Shannon's talking about it. I don't have to wait till he dies. He's now, recovered from everything that happened years before, and now he's gone public with it. So, okay, so I can go public with these Oak Shannon notes. And I heard Grant saying that in an interview or something. And so I immediately picked up the phone. I know Grant Cameron quite well. We're good friends and done research together for a long time. So and a lot of that's been sharing stuff on the history of the working group. So I call up Grant and I say, Grant, now truth is I had once before, because in presentations I'd done over the years about the history of the working group, I had pages of the Jack Houck notes from that original meeting in there, ones that were pertinent to things I was saying in my PowerPoint presentation. So I would show those pages from, photos of the actual pages I got from Jack Houck. But not the whole thing. And a researcher online who posts a lot of things online said, why don't we post the whole thing? You keep talking about, but you've never showed the whole thing. Is there any reason? I said, no, I haven't needed to in context of my presentation, And he said, well, can we post the whole thing? So we did. And that was before. So truth is I'd put it out there. But when Grant Cameron says, I'm going to release these Oak Shannon notes, I call up Grant and I say, why don't I release the Jack ones, or re-release as the case may be, the full set of Jack Houck notes, because they back up Oak Shannon, who he is, and this whole background of how we would have known Eric and how that happened. Okay. And so I do that to kind of back up Grant, to back up his notes. What's very interesting is we both have the original agenda from the meeting. He has all these handwritten notes by Oak. I have handouts and stuff from the meeting, but when you put the 2 sets together, they perfectly dovetail, and you can see, like, mine are the outline that Oak's notes follow. So it backs up the reality of Oak's notes from the meeting, because mine and his go, you can tell they go together. I have the documents and the overhead projections that he's talking about in his notes, but he didn't have copies of, that kind of thing. So they perfectly go together, and you can really get an outline and a detail combining the 2 of what happened in that meeting at BDM. But again, the whole deal was it backed up Oak Shannon and his relationship to the story and how he knew Eric, and how he would have recommended that to the Admiral. But also what was the total surprise to me was when I finally see, provided them to me by Grant, the whole Oak Shannon notes, I see the AP10 reference. Actually, I tell you the truth, it was someone else online, in all fairness, because if that person's listening, they're going to say, wait a second, that was me.
Okay.
Someone else online saw the AP10 reference and brought it to my attention. I immediately pull out my set of notes and go, oh my God. So I don't think I'd read them in that much detail that I'd see at the bottom of this page where it says Advanced Physics Group, AP-10, AP10 group. And I'm like, wait a second. And so then I'm pulling out that, and then I'm pulling out the Wilson Davis notes and realizing there's the reference to AP10. So in 85, a document says we call ourselves the AP-10 group, and here's Admiral Wilson saying, Eric, I know all about the history of the AP-10 group.
And so it completely
So
corroborates the whole thing.
And yeah, exactly. Now, and there's more. I mean, there's so much evidence. It just goes on. Because then, okay, so then last May, now this is kind of where it stands. You have Oak Shannon out there talking. You have everybody looking at the background. The Admiral in the meeting with Eric says, if you ever say anything about this, I will deny it. Because, of course, he's got
Admiral
Major
Wilson.
Egg on his face. Admiral Wilson says, I'm going to deny it.
Well, and
that stands to reason because of his position is threatened, and he looks the other way about this seemingly very illegal program and how the government's lost control of this. He doesn't want to admit to knowing about that. So he tells Eric, if you ever go public with this, I'll deny it. Yeah, I'm pissed off. I'm telling you and your friends. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go public about it. He says, I'll deny it if it ever comes up. So when people start reaching out to the Admiral about this, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It never happened, blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, you have Eric telling people it did happen.
But how much?
You have Oak Shannon telling people it did happen.
Right. But how much do you think that Admiral Wilson denying it is out of self-preservation, making sure he doesn't end up in Leavenworth and losing his clearance, losing his pension, all of that?
But I've been saying all along, in these upcoming hearings, which now let's jump forward. Okay. So May of last year, we're all watching the public congressional hearings. It was a closed door one and a public one. The public congressional hearing with the different, I was going to say senators, congressmen, but at the time it was congressmen who had been looking into the UFO subject and had written up the language in the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, and the pages that demanded that there be this, what was at the time was a UAPTF, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, put together with the Pentagon and headed up by Bray and Moultrie. Okay, Bray and Moultrie.
Right. I like to refer to them as plausible and deniability, but with Moultrie, there's neither of which. Trust me on this.
Yeah, I'll borrow that. So plausible and deniability. Yeah. Okay. So they were like, so the meeting's going on. They're kind of denying everything, or we don't know. Well, we learned that they didn't really have much funding. It was really just them. It may have been, that this was a side thing. No one was really checking on what they were doing. So by the time they had this hearing, maybe they didn't really know, and hadn't looked into it. But you have the congressman going, well, you guys need to know this. Who else is supposed to know this? We gave you this department and gave you this task and put you guys in charge of it. So we need to know these things, But one of the things was Congressman Gallagher brings up the Wilson Davis notes. And any of us who knew anything about it, we're seeing this, here we are watching C-SPAN, here we have this live hearing, and my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, what just happened? I'm sure it wasn't.
I'm gonna interrupt for a second, and I'm just gonna say, you should keep an eye on Congressman Gallagher.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Trust me.
Yeah. I do.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of people looking into this and very serious about it. So Gallagher, I'm with you on that. So Gallagher, reaches into the public records like, what? And of course, they knew nothing about it. Bray and Moultrie were like, oh, we know, we've never heard of it,
He has. Trust me.
Yeah.
Moultrie has, trust me.
Now they have. But at the time, either they really were good at playing stupid and should get Academy Awards, or they really didn't know about it at the time, but they do now.
Oh, trust me, Moultrie knew.
Okay.
And he's a bad actor. He won't be winning any awards. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Okay, yeah, you're probably right. Okay. Matt, you're very funny. Okay. So at that point, so now we're going, who told Gallagher? How did Gallagher know? Well, question answered, because in a couple of interviews, I think the first major one was an interview. So Dr. Gary Nolan, who was part of this whole group, okay?
He will be on, by the way. He'll be on our show. We had to reschedule Dr. Nolan. So he will be, I have to look at the calendar. We had to reschedule him once due to a
Is that
scheduling.
your big announcement you mentioned?
No.
Or somebody else? Oh, okay.
No. But
something else in the works.
No, Dr. Gary.
Okay.
It's funny. So I'm sorry. I'm a bit ADD. I'm going to interject.
That's pretty big.
So I work in I work professionally in the television business, and I'm around a lot of very big stars that don't even faze me. But the one day that Dr. Gary Nolan called me on my cell phone, I about fell off my fucking chair. Oh wait, I can't say that. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Keep going.
Bleep that out. You know that.
Yeah.
Appropriate audiences will bleep that out.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Slip of the tongue. Anyway, sorry. I digress. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but I had to put that in there.
No problem. So, Gary Nolan, I think, I'm not sure what the first time he said it, but I know he said in an interview with Ross Coulthart, from Australia. Ross Coulthart, known quite well in the field now and doing.
He's awesome. He's my journalistic hero, I have to say.
Yeah.
Ross, if you're listening, come on to our show. Anyway, please
there's a couple of people in this field. Billy Cox and Chris, and a couple of people doing really good work in this.
100%. It's a team effort for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Considering how much journalism is either non-existent or sloppy or just gives it lip service every once in a while, it's really nice when some very serious journalists, Brian Bender with Politico, and others that have given it real serious attention. So we're very grateful to all of them for doing that. But going on, so and more should obviously,
Chris Sharp, by the way, I don't know if you followed any of his work.
Yeah.
But oh man, he's
that's why I just said Chris. I meant Chris Sharp.
Yeah, this guy's a star. But seriously, all of these folks. There's Mark von Rennenkamp, Ross Coulthart, my Australian hero, I hate naming people because inevitably I forget someone. So,
I know. Same here. I apologize to everyone I'm forgetting, but these are some people who've done obviously really, really good work.
100%.
List of.
Right.
And we're so grateful. And we wish more mainstream journalists would. I'm not a Fox fan, to say the least. But they have done good work.
Well, and and I have to.
And I'm not going to get political. Okay?
No. As I should not.
Tucker has done some good work on this, including his interview of Dr. Gary Nolan, which was outstanding. So
I'm gonna share with you something. So I'm obviously on the left side of the aisle.
I've seen your show. I figured that out.
Our main account, Stand for Better, we're primarily Democratic political activists. However, on the UAP issue, we are 100% bipartisan. We've given credit to folks in Congress such as Tim Burchett.
And Matt, that's an important. Sorry,
hold on 1 second. Let me just finish this one thing. So the interview that I show my contacts or relationships on the Hill, we'll just put it that way. The interview that I always show for people that need to have a primer on the subject is Dr. Gary Nolan's interview with Tucker. I freaking hate Tucker, but I have to say that interview is by far the most informative, and I truly think it's by far Dr. Nolan's best interview and a great primer. Which, by the way, my hat is off to you for coming on today, and thank you. There's so many people that you're welcome that have no idea about this subject, and trust me, this is going to be front and center really, really quick. So people like yourself coming on and Dr. Gary Nolan doing interviews on this subject and talking to folks in a way that from someone that has not been doing this as long as you have. I've only been looking into this stuff for like a little over a year. I mean, I'm a baby when it comes to this. So thank you. Our hat is to all of you for putting in the work. I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a UFO historian. It's people like yourself that have really put in the hard work, and had it not been for people like yourself and others that have been so dedicated to the subject, I'm not sure that it would have seen the light of day, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I never dreamt in my lifetime, or certainly my years of, I've been in the field for 34 years. I never dreamt that we'd get this far along in disclosure and this close to it.
Agreed.
I mean, we're in the process. It's no longer,
Yes.
oh, disclosure's over here. We're in the process of it right now, and we have been for a number of years. And this year, it's really kicked into high gear. So we're in it, and I never dreamt that we'd be here. I'm so glad. Couple things you just said there that I think are important, and I want to get back to why I brought up Gary Nolan. One is Ross Coulthard, like you were saying, doing amazing work. He did an interview with Gary that may even be more in depth and better.
I know what you're talking about.
By far it is.
Yeah,
the one with Tucker.
Yeah, but Phil, for people that haven't seen it, and I agree, this was a very important interview that he did with Ross Coulthard. So maybe give people a sort of summary of what occurred during that interview. It's really significant.
Well, it was, getting back to the Wilson Davis connection, and why Congressman Gallagher brought it up, is Gary Nolan has now said in multiple interviews, I'm the one who briefed Congressman Gallagher. So here you have Gary, who's part of this group, loosely associated with the working group, was hired by them because of his position at Stanford and everything he's done with microbiology and virology and everything, so they have used him to analyze blood and then also metal samples and stuff like that. So when you get into the different metals from possible retrievals and things like that. So Gary has a very close connection and was used by those group of people and working for them. Whether he was officially on the science advisory board, I'm not exactly sure, but I believe he was. But at the very least, he was consulting to them regularly. Through that, he became friends with Eric, of course, given their background, similar. I could understand, having met both individuals, I could understand why these people would have been friends. Okay, besides they're working together. Okay, so here's Eric. So here's Gary Nolan saying, in his interview with Ross and in other interviews, my friend, who I knew because we were in a group together, he actually talks about that. We were in this group together, so he's talking about the working group. My friend, Dr. Eric Davis, told me that meeting happened, and those are his notes from it. And so how does Congressman Gallagher bring it up? Because Dr. Nolan briefs Congressman Gallagher. And Gary has said, I briefed Congressman Gallagher. Please, when you interview him, ask him for clarity about the whole thing. Yep. Now he has gone and talked to them on the Hill. Gary has multiple times. So has Eric. I think maybe the lid's on him to not say a lot, and he may not be able to talk about it now. But I would say, Matt, do your research, cite which interviews in which he said it. I'd be willing to help you find those. Which interviews he said, like with Ross and other ones, to say you said this, this, and this, and chain them together. Because I think he said, yeah, what I said then was accurate. Even though he can't talk about it now, he could certainly say, yeah, I said that, and which would be the same as admitting. Gary's very cautious, and he's very quick to do that. And even a recent interview a couple of days ago, he kind of did the same thing. The one he did with Vinny and Vinny's co-host, now I'm forgetting her name. I'm so sorry, honey. Oh my God, I'm forgetting.
Yeah, Vinny and Katie Hallen. And I have to say, we're going to take a sort
of... And that was amazing what Gary said on there.
Oh, for amazing. Sure. And I want to take a slight mid-station break to kind of thank a few people and then also kind of catch up with my notes here. But yeah, no, actually, I have to say, Vinny was the very first person that ever came on our show on the UAP topic. And we are huge fans of Disclosure Team and Vinny and Katie Howland, both of which are really just doing amazing work on this topic. But I just because I knew I was gonna forget people. So folks that I love to listen to, and and I'm kind of like I'm sort of like Switzerland. I love everyone except for maybe Tucker Carlson. Anyway, and Mick West. Folks that I really think have done an enormous job as far as getting this topic in front of people are people like Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, who's the OG of this entire thing. I mean, it really kind of goes back to him, and folks that are really doing great work on this as well, such as Mark von Rennenkamp, Daniel Otis, and of course Christopher Sharp, who is a good friend of the show. And then we also have other friends as well. Dave Scott of SOR Radio. They're just some really there's so many people, and I really think that this is a team effort. It truly is. This topic transcends party. I mean, I'm the raging liberal your mom told you about, but when it comes to the UAP topic, we are very supportive of our Republican colleagues that are doing a lot of work in this. Go ahead.
Comment on that. It's very important that everyone understand. With the House and the Senate right now, this is completely bipartisan.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's both sides are going after this,
100%.
and they're teaming up to do it
because they know it's real.
Because they know it's real.
It's not seagulls and it's not drones.
Well, and why do they know it's real? They've had all these closed-door briefing sessions
100%.
with military witnesses, with scientists, with Gary Nolan, with Eric Davis, talking about crash retrievals and recoveries, with other scientists, with other government insiders, with all the military witnesses. They've met with all these people. They've seen better footage, better documents, everything. They know now it's real. And they know, this is the Senate and Congress, knowing the DOD and the Pentagon are lying to them, and they know it. And yet, this is a breakdown of the chain of command of government, because the Pentagon and the DOD have to answer, and they only get funding for what goes through Congress and the laws passed by the Senate, right? It goes through them. So they do have oversight. That's why we have intelligence committees and spending committees in the Senate and Congress. That's their job. So there's a breakdown. So those committee members are like going, no, this is being kept from us. And they're upset because they've known the proof, and they know these guys have the proof, and they want it. And I think that's why we're getting disclosure. They're digging. I think it was bound to happen.
It 100% is. I'm going to derail I'm going to derail our conversation for 2 seconds, because there've been a lot of people that have been putting stuff up in chat. Again, Super Chat is open. We love doing the show. We don't love paying the bills. So of course we appreciate your financial support. Or if you don't want to do that, we always appreciate just telling people about our show. If you're on Twitter, giving us a retweet and a follow at Good Trouble Show. If you're on YouTube, give us a subscribe at The Good Trouble Show. A comment, a thumbs up, all that stuff helps the algorithm gods. So, having said that, first of all, another good friend of ours who has he's really been a big help to us in introducing us to folks. James Landoli of Engaging the Phenomenon. So he said specifically to tell you hello. And actually,
James Landoli is my dear friend.
I love this guy, and I have to say I have to go back, but I think he actually connected me with you when I wanted. I'd heard about you for a very long time, and I think he was the one that reached out. Okay, so first off,
thank you, James, and thank you for putting me together with Matt. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, you're welcome. First off, Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio, who, by the way, has beard growing abilities that I can't even aspire to touch. I went on a show once. I spent about a week trying to grow my beard out, and it was a half-ass attempt to what Dave is able to do. But I had such a great time appearing on that show, and thank you, Dave, to your generosity and moreover your guidance and Yeah, he's a great dude, and actually
Yeah.
Dave was so Spaced Out Radio. Remember earlier I said that I've only been listening or tracking this topic for a little bit over a year. Dave Scott was the very first podcast I had ever listened to, podcast period, let alone the UAP topic. So my heart goes out to Dave. We love Dave. Anyway, I'm gonna go
Yeah, he
through the
just
thing.
does a great job. I just hung out with him we were both speakers together at the Bay Area UFO Con in San Francisco, and so him and I were hanging out together.
I love that
he's a
guy. I
great
could
guy.
sit and just talk to him forever. If
Yeah.
anyone here is not following Spaced Out Radio or listening to it as a podcast,
Yeah.
as someone that was the very first podcast AI had ever listened to, and then also on the UFO topic, please listen to this guy. Again, there's so many that are really
Other
great.
subject matter.
What's
Other
that?
subject matter too. He gets into
Oh,
other
yeah.
subject matter too. Paranormal things. Really
It's
big on the Bigfoot stuff. But I tend to listen when he does the UFO related topic, and a friend of his, Tim, comes on with him and does the UFO report. That's
Yeah.
incredible when he does that.
he's
And,
he's a
you know,
broadcasting
great-
hero of mine. For sure.
yeah.
Okay, so we're going to quick go down. Sawan, thank you for joining us. Maga Man, hello. The owls are not what they seem. I know what you mean by that. Christian Morales. Actually, I'm going to come back to this question. And let's see. Sorry. Hello from Denmark, John Peterson.
Thank you to everybody listening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And above all, thank you, Melinda, for coming on our show. This has been such a great interview. Okay, so let me finish up here. Oh, you're welcome.
Kind of all over the place, but we got there.
Oh no, for sure. Drew Cook, watching from Ireland, always a great show. Drew, thank you.
Of doing so much work, I was going to have like an outline of notes, like bullet lists, to make sure we covered points.
Right.
It didn't happen.
No, it's all good. This is how we roll here. Dave Smithhurst. I'm probably butchering your name as I can't even talk.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for the super chat. Very, very kind of you.
He's always very kind to me online. Thank you, Dave.
Matt Monroe. Okay, I'm going to come back to questions in just a second. I just want to thank people that have dialed in.
All my friends.
Okay, yeah, no, so many great friends here. Mike O'Donnell, thank you for your comments. Julie Farrell says hi, Melinda. Hi, David. Hi, Matt. And let's see, Dave Smithhurst. Hello, Julie. Julie Farrell, help out with some questions. My UFO Twitter kindred giggles. Let's see. David Smithhurst, I've sent one as a super chat, but I think Matt will go into it later if there is time, as Melinda has a lot to go through. We'll go through that. So, David, I might have missed that, so please send it if I'm kind of multitasking here, of course. Anyway, let me go through some questions really quick.
I admit I've not looked at the chat, so I've not seen.
No, don't worry about it.
I was giving you my undivided attention, Matt.
Yeah, and it's been great. And I don't want to break up your thoughts here, but I don't want to get too far because so many people are listening in and are just loving what you're having to say. So
besides Gary coming forward and saying, this is my friend who said this to me and said the meeting happened, Eric Davis told me, and that's why I briefed Gallagher. Okay. But it's also important to say, we talked about this earlier, that Valet in his new book goes into it, and from his journals at the time said, oh yes, Eric came back from this meeting, and here's what the admiral told him, and we were all given notes. I mean, it's incredible the stuff in Valet's book that backs this up. And like literally 5 or 6 places that specifically back up that the meeting happened. But then, as we talked about Richard Nolan in that presentation he recently did online, to go into the fact that Valet in his books, that's what Nolan's little online presentation about. Valet in his book says that in the Wilson Davis notes, in that meeting between the Admiral and Eric, the Admiral goes into, these guys said there was a pre-existing attempt to get into this, which is why they, put the lid on tighter, and why it was turned away in part because it almost failed in the past when someone looked into it. Well, that's what Richard, all he was doing was reviewing Vallee's book. Vallee in his book goes into the working group knowing about this previous attempts and that they heard from these two other individuals involved prior to the admiral who looked into the program. One of those individuals got to see the craft in the possession of in that note it specifically says Lockheed. So in the possession of Lockheed was this craft. This other guy got to see it, and again was kind of turned away from exposing it, and it almost blew up in their face. So they didn't want to risk it again with telling the admiral. So the admiral didn't even get to see the craft or anything or a tour, because again they didn't want to risk the exposure, and knew that they could send them away. See, this again, it shows not only that there is a reverse engineering program, craft in our possession, that they've been working on it. What do you bet since then they figured out a lot? If there's one craft, what do you bet there's more? But all it takes is one. All it takes is one reverse engineering. All it takes is what's in that to be accurate, and that shows. And again, I think a really big important thing we learned from the notes is it became a corporate secret. It went into corporate hands, that the government lost control of the UFO subject by handing it over to corporations. Now, I don't believe they totally did. Obviously they did, but it's twofold. It's one is they lost some control, and the other is that gives them plausible deniability. And that's why I'm saying it's going to take real chutzpah, and real fortitude from Congress to look into that. They need to have the admiral testify. Certainly start with Eric. I know he has behind closed doors. I don't know if they got into subject matter. My guess is since that came up last May, it has. They need to have Eric testifying. The meeting happened. Those are my notes, which then forced them to go with that information to the admiral to have him testify. Everyone in the field is saying, "Oh, the admiral said he wouldn't." I'm like, you guys, he was head of Joint Chiefs of Staff. When Congress says, "Come before us," he's not going to refuse Congress. Look at this guy's background. I don't think for a minute he'd refuse Congress. And if he ever did, and they had the fortitude to really look into it, they can subpoena him.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they need the admiral to testify. Anyone in Congress or the Senate, if you're watching this, I doubt they are, but if they do,
You might be surprised.
You've got to have them testify. You've got to have them. Yeah, I don't.
By the way, you were talking about plausible and deniability. So when I talk about plausible deniability, who were at the UAP hearing, plausible is Moultrie. He's Mr. Plausible.
Yes, yeah.
He should be called up.
Especially since he's been handed other positions since then. And has taken a more serious leadership role in it. So,
money talks.
Yeah, so there's more there. That's right. Yeah, there's more there. It's beholden on Congress to do a thorough investigation. They really need to do a congressional investigation into this, because you guys, we're talking crash retrievals. We're talking, first off, UFOs are a secret that shouldn't be in corporate hands. They're for all of us to know. It's about our position in the universe. It's about who we are, really where we came from, our future. We're not alone out there. And then the suppression of those technologies that could benefit all of mankind. It's like, you guys, that doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to all of us. And shame on any corporation keeping that from us. Why? Profit. Good old-fashioned American greed. Shame on them.
Yeah.
And Congress needs to do an investigation digging into this. Who has the technology? We talked about Battelle and other companies. Who has it? How did they get it? How did that happen? Why are the SAPs and the USAPs and the unacknowledged special access and the WAVE, why are they out of control?
Right.
And it's froze me up in a
That's okay.
Hopefully that's not how I look up.
Yeah, it's probably. I'm sure the boys back east are listening in. So, yeah. No, well, I mean,
I can imagine this screenshot.
Yeah. No, I don't believe in coincidences too much.
Lagging internet here at the center.
Oh, that's okay. I have to
Yeah,
I have to
lagging internet. Lagging. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. This is totally off topic. This is how my ADD brain works, but I'm old enough to remember the overhead projectors that you were talking about that had like the clear film.
Yes.
I was kind of like a troublemaker in school, and
This is how old I am. I used them in my career.
okay, yeah.
I
So
used them at presentations.
we had this math teacher named Mr. Hawes that we used to mess with all the time, and the way we would do it is, or the way I would do it, was me. I would go early into the class, and then I would go and jiggle the bulb out of the overhead projector. So when he would get up to do his lecture, he would turn that thing on, and it wouldn't work, and he would get so mad. It was hilarious. And anyway, not UFO topic.
Education. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, can I ask you some questions before? And
yes.
I don't want to break your train of thought, but lots of people are throwing questions up, and I want to make sure we can get to a few of them. Okay, so all right, Dave Smethurst, does Linda think that the disclosure faction and the military and IC community think that the core group is making discussions about handling the phenomenon that are fundamentally wrong? That's a really great question. Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to go with that. I mean, yeah, I think it's safe to say, or at least it appears that Senate and Congress, are upset and thinking there's decisions that are wrong, that are being kept from them, that should fall under their jurisdiction to have knowledge of, at least, or be read in or something. So I think that they think that. So I guess that's a yes, because obviously they think that.
Right. Okay. Firstly, Brew UFOs, shout out to Witness Citizen, Sean, Raach.
Hi, Sean.
Thanks for giving Matt your money, Dave. Dave donated $6, 6.99 pounds. It's going to go to beard care products. So thank you. if I can even grow one at this point. But anyway, Dave,
come on, you guys. That's worth more than that. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. And Brew UFO, shout out to Vinny. Vinny, we love you, and Katie. You guys are doing great work. I gotta love Dave and his hair.
Guys, that was such a good interview that they did with Gary, and yeah, that was great.
It was great. Yeah, great. And of course, Dave says hi, Matt and Melinda. Hi, Bat.
Tyler Henry. That was amazing.
Hold on a second. Just sorry. Sorry. I know.
Tyler. Hi, Tyler, if you're listening.
One day, hopefully, I'll have a production staff that will make this not a cable access show. So let's see. Uplifting.
We might clean it up a little more professional than today.
Well,
we're having a good time.
I have 2 Emmy awards, and this isn't Emmy material. So, but we try. Sorry, there was another good question. At the end of it, that's all that we love to do. Avi, yes, but Gillibrand was on fire because she knew LYOD and other people were deliberately dragging their feet on this. People.
Oh yeah.
These people. She suffers no fools, trust me. And when clowns like Moultrie get up there, she is a sharp cookie.
Her recent intelligence hearings, where she is demanding that AARO, which is of course the new Pentagon Department, all domain anomaly
resolution office.
Resolution. It's the word resolution.
Right. I'm going to make a game show out of the acronyms.
I know. Resolution.
It's coming. UAP acronyms.
Guys. I have all this in a presentation I just gave, but I'm lost without my PowerPoint. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. I'm almost done with the list.
So, but she demanded that they fund, and so Avril Haines, the head of the ODNI, Office Director of National Intelligence, sat there before her and said, yeah, we are funding it fully, because she was demanding that AARO get its full funding to do everything that Congress has asked them to do. And right there, recorded as Avril Haines saying, yeah, with all
Right.
these guys next to her with all their pins and badges and everything on, high-ranking military guys, and they're all going, oh yes, absolutely, So
I mean,
hopefully that's the case. But
I-
it shows how serious Gillibrand is. Yes.
I can tell you, and again, I come from the political world. That's primarily what we message on, and part of being involved in the political world for a good bit of time is you develop relationships with people on Capitol Hill and other areas of government, and in particular, people that are involved in this disclosure effort. Yes, there are instances of drones or space clutter, all that kind of stuff. They're not talking about this. And the thing, and I believe, well, actually, I don't believe, I know, Melinda, you spoke about this earlier, that these laws, this legislation, it's not made in a vacuum. So, when you have people like, the New York Times guy in Hallman Jenkins from Wall Street Journal, and then you have Mick West and Basement Boy, I'm blanking on his name. These guys, they do not know what they're talking about. They absolutely do not, and probably some of them are on someone's payroll, if you know what I mean. So these people in Congress, they are not fools, and more importantly, the staff that they employ are not fools. This stuff isn't generated just out on a whim. These laws, what they are looking into, the committee hearings that are forthcoming, these are all part and parcel out of data that they've received from people that have seen this stuff that have high clearances. I think that's I think it's one thing if you want to be a healthy skeptic about something, but to be an outright disinformation agent you're not doing your country any favors. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
and
there's a difference.
There's a big difference.
I would say healthy skeptic would be like John Greenwald, Blackball. That's a healthy skeptic.
Sure.
But as opposed to Greenfield and others, where it starts to get into out and outright debunking, and it's like, you guys, there's a difference. And
it's an agenda.
A
paid agenda.
It's an agenda. As you just took the words out of my mouth,
Right.
It makes me question who's paying them.
Oh, yeah.
And or is it just agenda because of inflated egos? And I don't know the answer. They're both equally bad. But
no comment on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I said Green Street is who I meant.
Green Street, but I call him Basement Boy.
Yeah,
but the point is,
but John Greenwald, healthy skeptic. There's other healthy skeptics.
Sure.
I don't mind skepticism.
Right.
You got to ask tough questions.
You
Believe
do.
it or not, you guys, for all that I do and having sightings every night with my tours and everything, I'm a healthy skeptic. I do tend to question. I do want to look at the evidence. That matters to me. I joke with my clients every night on my tours. I'm actually hung up about wanting the evidence. I want the sightings to be very real. So that matters to me. So I don't mind skepticism. There's just people in the field that are out and outright nasty, negative, and I think what everyone needs to do to them, it'll just make this real simple. Avoid them.
Yeah, completely.
They're attention seeking, and they'll go away if you stop giving them the attention.
I agree. So Melinda, David Smethurst. Firstly, thank you, David, for the very nice super chat. He has a freaking awesome question. I love this. I wish I would have thought of this. Question from Melinda. You're leaving Earth forever on a UFO tomorrow. What's your last Earth meal?
Oh, good Lord.
That's a great question, though. You have to admit.
Does anybody have
awesome.
a Wilson Davis question? Okay.
Yeah, and we'll get back on to Admiral Wilson. I know we've kind of gone off the reservation thanks to my poor hosting skills. But we'll stop with that question because that's a really good question.
There's a lot of things I really like. But the idea that what if where I'm going, I couldn't have Mexican food, so it's probably going to be Mexican food.
Totally.
A margarita,
100%.
Good fish tacos or something. It's like, oh my gosh, the thought that I wouldn't be able to ever have that again.
Right.
But you guys, somebody asked a Wilson Davis question.
Okay, all right. Let's go back to Wilson Davis.
Dave, I love you, bud.
Sorry, we've like I said, we've gone off the reservations. So I don't even remember where we left off I'm so sorry.
No,
Okay,
no.
so
Well, let's get into we're having hearings coming up. The
yes.
fact that they read that in, is it going to come up again? Good question, because it got read in before. And Gallagher said, next time I bring this up, I want you guys to know about it. Is that coming up? Have they proceeded asking Admiral Wilson, or have they, I proceeded asking Eric? I would think the question to that would have to be yes, because it came up before that
Right.
they would be pursuing with them. Does that mean we're going to get in these? Now we're hearing from so many sources, so many senators, congressmen talking about, now openly, it's well established that we're supposed to be having hearings in April. Now, of course, we know there's a lot of things going on politically, a lot of turmoil, whatever. There's Trumpism, everything, so it could be that it gets delayed, but I'm hoping that they're on track for at least starting up some hearings in April. If there's public hearings, I expect the first round to be military witnesses, at least would be a good place to start. That is where they should start. And that starts kind of conditioning the American public. I think anything in Wilson Davis will come up later, because it gets into a reverse engineering program, crash retrievals, stuff in our existence, or that comes up in closed door hearings. We'll see. But I think eventually they got to go there. They brought it up. They got into it. I can't imagine them not pursuing it at some point. And I think it's so meaty. It's important. It's that document is so explosive, those notes and what are in them. And if they have Eric say, yeah, the meeting happened, I took those notes, then Wilson's left to have to either say Eric's completely lying. I doubt he very seriously would do that. So,
by the way,
and then, like I said, it forces the hand of Congress to go, what reverse engineering? What craft? When did we get those? What do you mean crash retrievals? I mean, you guys, this is it's a ball string, and you yank on that string, and it's just going to unravel into a giant mess.
It totally will.
We have to go there.
And speaking of unraveling, particularly with my interviewing skills, that was actually uplifting tweets. I love this stuff. He was the one that asked about your last meal before you hop on you hop on the UFO
Yes.
to go where Zeta Reticuli or whatever. Anyway, sorry about that. I digress. I had to jump in there because
Mexican food, isn't that obvious? It's got to be Mexican food and margaritas.
Yeah, it's gonna be ground beef enchiladas and frozen margaritas. No salt for me. So.
Something made with shrimp in it.
Yeah. Okay. No, for sure. Anyway, Uplifting says no worries. He's basically saying I screwed up the shout out and the nice tip. But he says no worries. Just tell Melinda I appreciate it. Ask her about Group K. Sounds like the core group. I've only just now heard about this.
Same here. I don't know enough about it. Sorry, you guys. Somebody educate me who knows more about it. Send me some stuff on it. DM me on Twitter or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I got it. About it.
Yeah, I got it.
It may be part of the same. I don't know if it's related to the working group. Of course, I'm extremely interested.
So I was
or another group. There's probably more than one working group. I wouldn't rule that out at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought I had a question that I had not asked. So we were actually the first to report that people involved with legacy crash retrieval programs have been testifying in a skiff to Arrow, and this occurred. I think it was. I'd have to look at, but I think it was like around January or so. So I can tell you beyond any sort of doubt that people are talking. And also, in addition to them testifying to Arrow, they were also testifying to certain members of Congress, so senators in particular. So they're hearing about this 100%.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's
that's
much
good.
as
that's good. I've heard similar, probably some of the same sources, but that's great. And we'll see where these hearings go. I hope that there'll be public hearings. I it appears to me from all the senators and congressmen openly talking about this now and coming out of things like the balloon gate, the conference, the briefing afterwards, coming out and talking to the press, that they not only do they want to know for themselves and what's being kept from them and wanting control back of the subject matter, but it appears to me that certainly with Gillibrand that she really wants the public to know, and Burchett, and Gillibrand and Rubio and stuff really want the public to know. So that's why I think we will get public hearings. They may have to slowly develop. We'll see where they go in the first one. I've been surprised by them before about them moving ahead. So could we get into some of those advanced subjects the first time around? Maybe. Or they're planning to kind of ramp up to it. It's a very exciting time. I mean, there will be tremendous for everyone involved in this field. The amount of news that's happened just since the first of the year till now, let alone now that we're getting these hearings. I mean, when those happen, and we were talking about, thank God to the media out there paying attention and all those people who deserve it.
Except for Julian Barnes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, there are the naysayers, without it.
Right.
That, as Stanton Friedman used to call them, the noisy negatives.
Right.
The noisy
yeah.
negative.
Yeah.
They're annoying, but let's hope that some more mainstream news, broadcast news, etc. When the hearings happen, put it out there. I take people on my tours every night and ask them how many people know about this. There was nothing for years. And 5 years ago, I started to hear some stuff. It leveled off. Well, surprisingly, it's actually kind of dropped down. The public's not following this. These are people coming on my tours who say, show me UFOs. And I say, do you follow this? They say, yes. I ask them a couple things. Sorry, folks, if you're my clients, you're not following this. You're just not. They may be I even bring up Tic Tac that they don't know what I'm talking about. I bring up the Nimitz encounters they don't know. And so if it's not on a regular TV show, they're not getting it. And that's their extent of the knowledge. So now, luckily, some of the regular TV shows like Ancient Aliens and stuff have started to cover the disclosure stuff, and will more, I'm sure. But it's like we need network broadcast news to cover this beyond just Tucker.
Right. So here's the issue with this, and this is something that I've spoken to a lot of people about. So working as someone, as someone that works professionally in media, the elements of the government, and this isn't conspiracy, this has been going on for a very long time, they have relationships with people in the press. Part of those relationships, let's say that you're Julian Barnes, the New York Times, and you rely on Susan Go or maybe a couple other people for information regarding other national security matters. As part of that relationship, you're given information that you report to your publication, and that relationship to a certain extent comes at a cost. And what I mean by that is there are going to be times when the people that have been on your side and helping you are going to say, we need you to talk about this in this way. This sort of stuff, it occurs. And this is part of
that's how they keep those sources, is they do their bidding.
Right.
You have your Pentagon sources, you're doing their bidding. Do you have a source that can give you information? So I get why you have to use that. But at the same time, you're getting their version of stuff.
Exactly.
Luckily, some people are going to the senators and congressmen who are
and they are, but my and this is in particular the issue is, okay, so you've got Basement Boy or whoever spouting whatever garbage they're putting out, so they have like a very small effectual media footprint. But when you have like Hallman Jenkins of the Wall Street Journal or Julian Barnes of the New York Times that are clearly, we'll just say putting out Pentagon talking points or some element of the Pentagon, because they're always aligned. I mean, if you look historically, Julian Barnes of the New York Times prior to any sort of congressional efforts on the UAP issue, he has consistently put stuff out to poison the well. Hallman Jenkins is almost right in line. There's clearly a relationship there.
Well,
but this is going to be. I'll just finish and hand it off to you. This is going to be the challenge with the mainstream media. It's going to take fortitude with mainly the media executives, the people that drive all this, and are the ones that are signing the paychecks. It's going to take fortitude on their part to do the right thing and to put the truth out and not listen to what the disinformation peddlers in the Pentagon are putting out. It's got to happen. Because otherwise it'll be relegated to folks like Tucker Carlson and right-wing media.
Well,
it's gotta diversify from there.
And I'm hoping what will push that is these hearings we have coming up.
100%.
Yeah, and you get these military witnesses and stuff talking. There are some surprising places where there's some attention. Some of it expected, but some of it unexpected. And that's like, for instance, the comedy show hosts, who have addressed it. It's amazing some of the play it's getting on late night television and stuff. So you go, okay, people are paying attention. So, Colbert, has done multiple things on it, and others, couple others, And so you go, well, wait a second. To me, that starts to show where the public's temperature is at it. If they're covering it, they know there's an interest. And we know those hosts have an interest. So I just think, again, some more media attention, mainstream media attention, which hopefully the hearings will change that tide and tip that scale. Because once it starts tipping and they start covering it and looking into it and getting more people on their shows and interviewing them, that's just going to go, that's a tidal wave. That's a tidal wave waiting to happen.
And I guarantee you what will flip the switch is when historical crash retrievals come out. It won't.
Oh, sure. Well, even military witnesses firsthand talking about their close range sightings and the fact that all their instrumentation stuff picked it up. That will start a media avalanche right there, and it'll progress with everything else that may come later. Sure. This come on, you guys. I'm not in ufology for my shits and giggles,
Right.
It's like, come on. This is the most important thing to happen in human history.
Totally.
We're not alone.
Right.
There's others. And science is being held from us that can benefit the world. You guys, this should be the number one most important subject. And it will make all our petty, quoting Reagan, won't we come together, as his UN speeches and whatnot, and because we will. This will be the thing that brings the world into working together. And we need to go there as a human race for our consciousness, for our development, not to get too woo, but for our development, our consciousness, for peace on the planet. We have to go there, and it's time. And it's never tasted closer to me than it does right now. I just heard Steve Bassett do a brilliant presentation in San Francisco about this, and he's speaking up, and so am I, at Contact in the Desert. Before we're done, I'll plug all sorts of things. Shameless, of course. But Steve Bassett did this brilliant presentation where he talked about, at the very end, he said he used to run in marathons, big, true thing, major marathons and stuff. He said he would see that the finish line, and see the lights. He would get there at night after doing a decathlon or whatever. And at nighttime, he'd go, okay, I know I'm almost there. I can see the lights, And he said he's like feeling like he's seen the lights closest. Now, the problem is every time before, when you see the lights, they would move the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
This time it appears the finish line ain't moving, that we're getting closer faster than they're moving the finish line.
I agree.
And he also said, I forget who was quoting, someone famous, I think maybe Einstein, but he was quoting someone at the only way things were ever solved in our history and the greatest successes have come. And you could say, oh, it's knowledge, it's money, it's know-how, it's all these things, right? No, the true thing is it's perseverance. okay? And it requires perseverance. You guys, it's still a democracy. Senate and congressmen, and thus the DOD and everybody else are supposed to answer to us.
They work for us, not the other way around.
Forget that. First off, educate yourself as a voter and vote accordingly. Secondly, hold their feet to the fire.
Agreed.
Write them. Write the senators and congressmen.
I couldn't agree with you more. Melinda, I have to say this is one of the most entertaining and informative interviews I think I've ever done, and
thank you.
and I can't
Best
thank you
of
enough.
luck, because you've done a great job. So I really appreciate
well, thank you. And we both know that when we get pulled up onto the Tic Tac or whatever, it's margaritas and Mexican food for both of us. We'll be sharing it together. Right. Okay, so before we close, firstly,
suddenly I sing grays and sombreros, you know.
Exactly. So, folks, again, thank you for joining us. And if please give us a follow, subscribe. Melinda, how can folks find you and support your work?
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm at the Center for New Age in Sedona, Arizona, where I do my nightly tours. Oh my God! By the way, last night on my tour, we had a large formation. The very end of the tour, we'd already had great sightings all night. We flashed things with lasers, beamed to flash back, and we had amazing sightings last night. But at the very end, we're just about done, and we had a formation that was way high up, going really fast. They came together in a very tight formation, and then they split up, going opposite directions, like streaking off. And it was happening so fast. My clients and I agreed it was over 15 things, maybe about 20 things, at least 20 things in a cluster together. So on my tour so far, that's the largest formation, to see like 20 things in a cluster, and to be in a tight. In fact, my clients thought at first it was a triangle craft because they were in a tight triangle formation, like solid. And then all of a sudden they pulled apart, came back together, and then took off different directions. Anyways, I'm just saying, the reason I'm bringing that up is just to say, you know, I do the tours, and so UFOsightingtours.com. They can find me that way, tours with an S on the end. So UFOsightingtours.com. And then I'm on Twitter as @Linny Leslie, very active there, as many of your viewers know, and Facebook as Melinda Leslie. So those three ways are the best ways to reach me. And thank you for having me on. I'm speaking coming up at, what all am I speaking at? Contact in the Desert, which is the first weekend in June. Just look at contactinthedesert.com. And huge lineup of incredible speakers. Their emphasis this year is on science, technology. I think it's called Technology in the Future is their sub-theme. I'm very excited to be a part of it. I believe I'm going to be giving an overview about everything we just talked about with Wilson Davis combined. I call it reverse engineering the current disclosure, and I start with everything that's happened up to the minute and kind of go backwards up to about a year ago. I just did that in San Francisco, and it was extremely well received. So I'm hoping to be able to give that presentation again. And so that, and where I have all the dates and everything. Again, awesome. I'm lost without my PowerPoint. But anyways, there we go. So it's in there. It's in there. So I'm more precise. And then I'm going to be speaking at the Roswell Festival. And that's in the very beginning of July, the great big Roswell event. And Vinny, we talked about, is also speaking there. So we have an incredible lineup with that. I'm very, very thrilled to be a part of that Roswell Festival. And then I'm going to be attending a few other things. I'll probably be attending the MUFON, Mutual UFO Network International, Symposium. Shortly thereafter, in that same time frame, and I'll probably attend the International UFO Congress, which will happen in the fall. So, I'm attending a few events, but I'm definitely speaking at Contact in the Desert and the Roswell Festival, and I'm at Dave Scott's Vegas event.
Awesome.
I don't know if you know about that, Matt. You should join us.
Yes. Yeah. He's. I'm on the invite list. If I can swing it, I definitely, knowing that you're there, that just like up the ante significantly. I've never been, but I'm going to see what I can do about that. I would absolutely.
That'll be tremendous fun. So
absolutely love.
There.
Oh, awesome. That's great. And folks, we are going to be taking a bit of a hiatus. I will be in Washington, D.C. for about 10 days up to some things. And yeah, I think there's stuff coming around the corner. And again, my hat is off to you, Melinda, and other folks like yourself that have really
Ask
put in the
Gary
hard
those,
work. Pardon me?
ask Gary Nolan those tough questions when you have him on.
Oh, we will. Trust me.
Please.
I'm a huge Gary
Please.
Nolan fan. Anyway, thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining us, folks. And again, please give us a subscribe, a follow, all that kind of good stuff. You would be amazed when it comes to the algorithm of these things. That's what spreads these messages. So anyway, Melinda, thank you very much for your time. And yeah,
me.
this was awesome. And I look forward to having Mexican food with you on either a UFO or not a UFO. So.
One last thing, a couple of people would skewer me if I didn't say
Sure.
it. I'm in a new documentary that comes out April 18th called Accidental Truth
Great.
by documentary filmmaker Ron James. Accidental Truth. It's all about the disclosure stuff. It is remarkable. I am so proud to be in it, and that'll be on all pay-per-view channels April 18th. I'm so excited. That's
You know,
coming right up.
we will have you on our show after this airs. I know I'm going to tune
Please.
in now.
You should have Ron James on, the maker of the movie.
Cool,
It's
cool.
brilliant.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay, Melinda, thank you so much. And yeah, thanks for coming on. Melinda Leslie, ladies and gentlemen. And we usually have our closing credit roll, but I somehow screwed that up. I don't have it. Anyway, all right. Melinda, we'll talk to you soon. And thanks,
like I said,
everyone.
We're having a good time, Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Okay, folks, more soon on The Good Trouble Show.